minutes as well. Don't worry. But it's fantastic to have you here, Angela. And the reason why I contacted you and wanted you to be a part of the podcast is, I've known you for, I think it's the best part of about 10 years now, and you were, I can really remember it really, really well, at Longley Park. We had counsellors, etc. there, and I remember going into I know it was a room or whatever, and you were there. I thought, oh, what are you doing here? I didn't know you, but I thought, who's this black woman here? And I asked, they said, oh, well, that's the counsellor, a new counsellor, and that we got talking after that. Yeah. And it was probably, along with David Spence Madden, because he was around at the same time, the first time that I had ever known black people who were therapists.
Really?
Yes, it was the first time. What I'm saying about, it was the first time. That's 10 years ago. And talking to both you and David about, the area around therapy as such, it just felt as if there was this whole world which I'd never really thought about before. And particularly I was talking about it with regard to young people, but it was also about myself as well and my own life as well. And throughout the time I've known you, that conversation has continued, where, there's always been new things, ways of looking at the world, etc., which I've always found really quite exciting. And it makes me think slightly differently. And then having Bernie as well on the walking group, who's also a psychotherapist, so that's 3. And then David Campbell, 4, and Delroy Hall, 5. I'm suddenly thinking, wow. And, and the wow bit is that sort of like opening up different ways of thinking and trying to make sense of the world in which we live in and the world we have lived in. And that's really why I wanted you to be just getting conversation with myself and Lungani today. So it'd be great if you just tell us how you got into it in the first place.
I feel quite honoured to be with that conversation as well, and about how we met at Longley College. And actually, I will say that I absolutely loved working there. I just thought it was a great place to kind of be working with the young people. But for me, therapy in the black community, it wasn't something I planned to do. I'm going to be a therapist. No, not at all. It was like, you don't chat your business to nobody. Everything's like, you zip your mouth up, don't say nothing. How I got into it was just very briefly. I was working in the civil service, moving around in different departments as I got a little bit kind of like, oh, I know what I'm doing here now. I wanted another challenge. I left the civil service, took redundancy. Didn't know what I wanted to do. At the time, I thought about becoming a fitness instructor because I was heavily into kind of yoga and weight training and things like that, or a primary school teacher. So I went up to my son's school, infant school, and said, I just want to have a chat with you about becoming a teacher. Well, if you think it's, when school's finished, that your job's finished, then it's not like that. There's a lot of time that goes on in the background. I thought, okay, take that one off. I went down to the gym because I was off on maternity leave with my son. Went down to the gym and I came across a friend of mine who I'd met before, but I knew her brother from Sheffield because he used to hang around with my brothers when they were younger. And I got talking to her. She'd already started her training, and the trainer that was it was a training institute in Nottingham. She was wanting to kind of like get more black people onto the courses because they were predominantly white females. So she was hosting something in the community. This was in Nottingham, and so I went along and got introduced to this trainer. Tell me a little bit more about the course. She said, "Come along for a weekend taster session." So I went along to that. The type of training, the type of therapy that she was teaching was Gestalt. It might not mean anything to anybody, but if you want to look it up, it just means kind of working in the moment. There's lots of things attached to it. So I went along to the training session, and the first day we were just handed a bowl of strawberries. going around. You had to take the strawberry, you had to taste it, smell it, and use only 5 senses. And I thought, this is a bit weird. But as I got into the day, and the second day, I thought, this is what I want to do. I had an interest in child psychology anyway, and I think that was probably born out of trying to work out my own stuff growing up. But as a result of kind of going on the taster week, and I thought they were doing a day taster session, I thought, let me just go back to make sure. Went to that, along to that, and I thought, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. I didn't even look to see how much it's going to cost. I knew it was 4 years. I didn't look at the money at all. I thought, you know what, whatever happens, God will provide. And I went and just started. And that's how I got into it. Part of doing the course, we were told that we had to find a therapist. So that was the first time I'd actually thought about going to a therapist, because it was one of the conditions of the course. It terrified me, because I thought, gosh, there's like a lot of things I want to talk about. If I talk about it, oh no, don't worry about it, Angela, because actually you don't live in Sheffield anymore, so you can talk to anybody about it in Nottingham, because nobody knows you. So I thought,
but in a sense, aren't you back to that sort of don't chat your business?
Yes, that was the
and you don't want,
it.
and it's this very strong feeling, isn't it, there, which stays with you, you know, it's just like it runs through you all the time. You know, you get to be careful about your business, and yet actually sometimes you do need to chat your business. And
that's what happened. I just thought, if I'm going to do this and I've got to pay for it, I'm going to make sure that
yes, I chat my business.
I'm going to and so I had a list of a number of therapists, and back then, because I was training, because of the modality I was training in, I had to find a therapist that was in the same modality. Well, there were very few, certainly in Nottingham anyway, so they were all white. I saw 2 female therapists, no disrespect to female therapists, it's just those 2 that I saw. I thought, what I'm bringing, I don't think you could manage it. That's what I said to myself. I didn't tell them that. And I thought, so I took those off, and I saw 2 white guys. Again, for me, I just experienced them as probably not being strong enough or bold enough to kind of hold, because I knew I was going to be bringing some heavy duty stuff. And then the final person that I saw, I think it was spirit-led, because I remember ringing the person, and then there was a voice kept saying, you need to ring now, and I don't know where that voice came from. And I thought, met this therapist, and as soon as I came out of the lift, he said, oh, you're very good looking. And I thought, oh gosh, typical. That was my first sort of sense, was kind of like thinking, it's a black woman, it's like, he's a white guy. I sat down and we had a chat, and he was the one that I felt he could hold whatever I needed to bring. And we started the work, and I remember the very first session, that was an assessment, just to kind of see how we get on. So the very first session that I had, I'd written a list of all the things that I wanted to go through. I think it probably went on to about 2 pages. And I handed it to him, and he said, what's this? I said, oh, this is all the things I need to talk about. And he said, okay, that's not how therapy actually works, but I'm happy to know that, there's a lot of things you want to talk about. And therein just started a life process that I never, ever, I don't think anybody can ever imagine what it's actually like going through it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It was the best thing I'd ever done in my life, and it changed my life.
Well, we were saying earlier that that whole idea about therapy, or talking or chatting your business, that for many people within black communities, it's not something which we do. And there's often talk that actually, when people are not very well, feeling mentally not very well, they're having some mental health issues there, but actually, they don't even get offered the talking therapy. So on one hand, you're not getting offered it, and on the other hand, there might be a little bit of scepticism about it as well. I mean, and I think you were slightly surprised that I never encountered a black therapist until 10 years ago.
No, it's the same. It's the same here. I know. I mean, I would say probably kind of fortunately in my case, there was a therapy. It's sort of like a consortium of therapists within the church space, who they usually recommend, like if somebody is going through stuff. But because I think also religion plays a very big role, because we say, oh, well, you know what, we're going to pray about it. So because you're going to pray about it, so you don't necessarily need to talk to somebody about your stuff. So how did you, because as a person of faith, or at least, how did you navigate that conversation that you were going to enter a space where, like therapy? Because one thing I remember when we were growing up, we used to have these programs at church where they said, these are the careers you can go into. Because, police were one of them, one of those jobs you don't go in as a Christian, unfortunately. So they were saying. And I think anything to do with therapy, I think, where you are basically trusting yourself to come up with solutions for somebody.
It's not
You
so
see
much
what I'm saying?
You don't do solutions.
Well, yeah, I know, but the misunderstanding,
Yes.
you see what I mean,
Yeah.
pertaining to that. So psychology and stuff,
Yeah.
people say, no, psychology, you shouldn't do that. They'll teach you to question God, You know what I'm saying? So how did you navigate that space, though?
How did I navigate? I just think I'll take a step back to when I was about 18, 19. I was at college, and I didn't know at the time. I just knew there was something was wrong. I was in a relationship and it had broken down, and my mum was saying, "You better go see the doctor. You look depressed." And I was like, so I went to see the doctor. It was a family doctor. So she'd known me from growing up, and she said to me, you are experiencing kind of depressive symptoms. And this is going back a long time, quite a number of decades. And she said to me, I can give you, there's 3 things I can offer you. I can either offer you medication, I would advise you to kind of like go and speak to somebody, or do some exercises. So I thought, okay, I'm definitely not going to take the medication, because I thought I'm 19. I was like, I don't want to get into any of that, because I just thought black people, mental health, all those kind of things, getting medication. So straight away, that was straight off the list. I'm happy to do some exercises. She said, I could suggest doing yoga. I thought, I can manage that, but somebody to speak to? Absolutely not. I left there and I thought I was zipped up. No way. Everything was zipped up, locked down. There was no way that was going to happen.
Why did you have that reaction? Because it would have been a reaction I would have had.
I can feel it now. That feeling's come back of kind of thinking, it's like me open my mouth and go and open my business about what's going on with me and my family and everything else. I was like, that was never, ever going to happen. I think I was prepared to go down rather than to speak out about it. That's how strongly I felt about it. And I can feel that sense of kind of like nervousness even now when I talk about it. The fear of kind of speaking out my truth.
But that's the thing. I don't get that. It's like, because it's like we were talking about, you did mention like the whole idea of talking your business.
Yeah.
The part of the world where I come from, we'll talk everybody's business.
We do.
We do.
But not in a therapeutic way.
But that's what I'm saying.
We can chat everybody's business.
We chat everybody's business. You know what I'm saying? But and to the point about therapy, talk therapy, we always had that auntie who you could go and talk to if you were going through some stuff, who you trusted and you loved. For me, it was like my youngest auntie on my mom's side is the one I was cool with. You know what I'm saying? The others, but that one was cool because she's sort of like not similar in age, but close enough, and she was cool. So you could talk to her about the things that mattered, and she would listen because she understood, also being the youngest in her family. So it sort of made sense. But so in your case, you're thinking of going to, the first conversation you had.
With my GP.
Yeah, with your GP.
Yeah. But I also find it quite interesting that your mother said that, you look depressed. I cannot remember when I was 18 anyone using language like depressed.
Yeah.
No.
I remember people using language like the person, them going mad. We're on wheel. But never depressed.
No.
And people being angry or disappointed with you, pull yourself together, etc. There's quite a lot of pull yourself together. And I always find it quite interesting because, growing up in Britain there, and, they always make, the general British sort of like character is often said to be stoical. Well, I'd have to say the Caribbean Jamaican is quite stoical, but you just sort of like you present up front, and that front is the front which you're going to go out there with, etc. Yeah. And back those days, it was very much like that. Yeah. I was talking to someone on one of our walks about something that happened at school and feeling very upset about it, very emotional. And I said to her, I didn't go home and say to my mum, I feel really upset about it. Mm. And then I sort of turned to her and said to her, did you do that? Go to your mum and just sort of like said, I'm upset about something. And she looked at me and said, what? And that's quite a big, and that realisation, that was what it was like. And this is not me putting anybody down. Yeah. It just was like that. You didn't show those emotions. And for me, that says that actually it's so difficult later on when you're talking about being 18. Yeah. When you're 18, you're just starting out, aren't you, in life? And it's scary. Literally
starting out for me, because I was going to say that, we said this, I was saying it earlier, that I wasn't allowed out to experience the world.
Yeah.
And I understand why my mother didn't let me out, because it was a, girl child, I don't want you to go out there to go and get pregnant. So it's like, I felt that I was under house arrest. That's what it felt like.
That's quite that's a big one.
But that's how it felt, because I wasn't allowed out apart from to go to and from school.
Yeah.
And if we went out as a family, 6 weeks holidays, I never saw friends. I think I can only remember one incident where I went out in the 6 weeks holidays. I was to go and meet a school friend, and we sat and just played making daisy chains and came back home.
So you never had friends come over to play?
No, we never had friends come over to play.
We never had that.
No, or even having sleepovers was not even a
What's
thing.
That?
Exactly. But I some of my upbringing, I kind of has been either blocked out or I can't remember, but a lot of it I remember as just being on my own most of the time. Mm. As I got older in secondary school, I started sewing, and my mum had a sewing machine. She didn't like sewing. My grandfather was a tailor in Jamaica, and I remember going there as a 9-year-old, seeing this Rastaman bringing this beautiful materials to kind of make a suit and things. So maybe I picked it up from him, because once I got the sewing machine, my mum said that she didn't want it, I started using it, and that was it for me. So that was where I spent most of my childhood, was in my room sewing, making things, being creative, going to the library every Saturday morning to go and get a book to kind of make felt toys or learn to knit and those kind of things. But generally speaking, you said at 18, 19, I was allowed out because I was going to college then, so that gave me a bit more freedom. So and I used that time to find out freedom. But it was, for me, exactly as you said, I was very stoic. No one really knew what was going on behind the scenes, as it were.
But if that's a sort of like, I'm going to make it in sort of like a cliche characterisation, that for many of us growing up, in Britain at that time, you're sort of like either born or you come here when you're young, your parents are busy doing what they have to do to survive. You're surviving. We were surviving, looking back on it in school and, all the things we had to experience at that time. And you're being stoical. Yeah. You're presenting a face. But actually, inwardly, you are actually hurting. You're hurting, you're broken, you're damaged, you're experiencing all sorts of trauma, etc. And you could see by the time you get into your 18s and 20s that you're starting to see people who are struggling. You actually you can see them in the street struggling, can't you? And that was actually quite scary as well, I remember, at that particular period. I had a sister who was very unwell, mentally unwell, and we used to go up and see her at the hospital.
Yeah.
And but we never talked about it.
Yeah.
We never talked about it at all. And I knew other people who had a family member who had mental health issues, and no one ever talked about it. We didn't talk about it in the family, we didn't talk about it with one another as friends, etc. there. And that sort of thing about, that side of one's interior self wasn't something which was actually a part of the sort of like conversational landscape growing up in any way at all. And I go back to 10 years ago, that was the first time I really started to talk with other black people about this sort of thing in this particular way.
Yeah. it's, you know, as you're talking, trying to be that stoic, you know, and kind of like and presenting myself to be, yes, I'm great, but inside I was actually quite broken.
Yeah.
As you were talking, what reminded me, it was something quite. It was awful, actually. I remember an incident happened in the cinema, and having to kind of like bring that stoicism to a different level. We went to see the new Star Wars film was out. I took my younger brother, and back then, obviously, you'd get your tickets and everything, and there's somebody coming to serve you the ice creams and everything. So I'm sat. There's the aisle is on the left of me. That's on the left of me. There was an empty chair, empty seat. Then there was me. Then my younger brother. I put my coat on my lap, and a guy came and sat beside me and put his hand underneath my coat and was feeling my leg, and I froze. I thought, this isn't right, but I didn't know what to say. My brother's like this, just staring at the screen, and I was like thinking, this guy's rubbing his hand up and down my leg. Got up and then left, and as he got up and left, I just thought, I need to tell somebody, and I thought, who am I going to tell? It's like, what does he look like? And I never told anybody anything about it. Whereas now, if something like that happened, you'd have had the support, you know. You know, if it happened again, it wouldn't happen again anyway, because I'd have literally just punched his lights out. But in that moment, but those kind of things I've carried and never really told anybody.
And then obviously from a female point of view, those sort of things were so commonplace. Yeah. It was assault, and it was so commonplace, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you could see how parents then, going back to what you said there about not wanting you to go out. You know, you don't want to give them ammunition for you not going out, do you? And you know, I have to say, it's from a male point of view that we never thought about it as young men. To our discredit, I have to say. And I'm not. My sister was never let out.
Right.
And my sister has stories, and we laugh about these stories now. And actually, there's not. Well, we did laugh. I don't think we laugh about it now, because now I can see the pain she had to experience of going to a youth club as a 14-year-old and coming back and maybe just walking back with a lad. You know, she's 14 and dad waiting for her. Your face, you can say, I don't.
Yeah, you. That's not. 14, I wouldn't have been allowed out. But I just.
And he just went berserk at her, and you think. You know, so on one hand, you know, young women are being sort of kept in the house. Other hand, as protection. Other bit, when they go out, you've got that to contend with. And you know, you can fast forward to now and see. And you work with a lot of young people there. How for 14, 15 girls in puberty, why, you know, there's so much sort of like. So many issues for 14, 15-year-old girls. And I think if I'm right now, something like for every one male child who wants to transition to become a girl, there's something like 6 girls
want to
transition. Now, for me, it makes a lot of sense because to be a young girl is scary. You know,
But I've always asked that question, you know, because I think sometimes when we look at it from a gender point of view, sometimes, I mean, it's as if young ladies there's a sense of powerlessness. Even though I tell my sister, I'm saying, if you guys knew how much power you have.
Yes, we do.
You know what I'm saying? You'll be surprised how much of this world you'll change. You see what I'm saying? But I think there's always been a narrative, and I think it was perpetuated by us men, that women were powerless. But if you look at it and how we were raised at the knees of our mothers, you see what I'm saying? And the early lessons are from our mothers, because most of our fathers were never around. They never reared us.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier though about that, the language of emotions, and we're using that, you know, those 3 words, I love you.
Yeah.
Now, if as males we are brought up to have a particular persona, a persona which is strong, it's this, it's that, etc. there, and I went to a boys' school, so it was all like that, and you then don't have a different type of language to express feelings.
No,
Then
you
that
don't.
can become a real barrier, I think. And I think it has been for me. And again, going back to that idea about 10 years ago, in the last 10 years, I've seen quite a lot of changes in people starting to, or black men trying to actually get their head around some of these issues, and in a way doing their own little journey like you started when you were 18, and having to deal with some, big issues, like that incident you talked about there, and how do you make sense of it, or not make sense of it, or say, whatever it is, how you deal with it.
I couldn't make sense of it at all. I just thought, I can't tell anybody about what's happened. I never told anybody. I don't even think I told my brother till later on in years, because I just thought, what do I say? Because I don't know who the person was. I didn't know if it was right, whether it was. I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know. I didn't feel I had anybody that I could go to actually talk about it. So I just kept it.
But who do you? It's like even like for when boys go through the same thing, because many of us we went through that. It's until like of late when we are trying to process that inappropriate behavior from others, then we ask. Who could you go to?
Who could I gone to?
Yeah.
I
you know what I'm saying?
Wouldn't have gone to my mum, because it would have been, you see, I don't know what she would have done.
Yes,
I'm
interpreted
like, who did tell you if you go? Because sit down and she would have. That's my sense of my mum, is kind of like, I always felt, no disrespect to my mum, I just know that I can only respect her for what she could do with what she knew and what she had.
Yeah.
In terms of, but I always felt that I was always the one that was in the wrong. So I didn't. My mum would have been the last person I would have gone to have talked about it.
And that's and in this, you,
which makes me feel really sad.
And as a parent now, you'd hate that to be the situation.
Absolutely, 100%.
I mean, I had a situation. I know when I was about 9 or 10, I'd gone out to play with some. I don't know what I was doing, but some white lads set a dog on me. And the dog bit me back, and I didn't tell my parents, because it would have been, I thought they'd be saying, "Oh, who's sending you up there?" And that was my first thought. I'd rather just deal with this back pain turning into whatever. Than actually tell my parents, because and I just think it was the time then, the situation, etc. But now, as a father, and I've got 2 grown-up children there, that you'd like to think they would come and talk to you about their issues, even as adults, because they're in their 30s and there's a lot of stuff which they're going to have to deal with in their 30s, etc., which you still want to be available for them, in that emotional support, but you've got to do the work now.
That's exactly right, and that's why I say that I did my training and I went through therapy myself for the courses for 4 years, and it was like we had to do 40 hours a year each year, and I stayed an extra year because life was changing at that time as well. I was leaving Nottingham to move back to Sheffield, so I was in therapy for 5 years straight, and with that it helped to support me to parent my children, and I was intentional about how I was going to parent my children, to allow them space, to allow them to have a voice first of all, because I didn't feel that I had a voice, to say whatever they wanted to say as long as they were being respectful, whatever feelings came up. We would talk about it. Even when they were little, in the bathroom we had tiles in one of the houses, and I'd got there's like crayons that they can use to kind of draw pictures that you can wash it up. So I'd put both their names. I've got 2 children, a boy and a girl. I'd put their names up on the tiles, and they had emojis and things like that we're using at school. So I got them to put an emoji up every morning, or most mornings, when they got up to let me, so that I knew how they felt. So if they were happy, I'd say, "Oh, what is it? We'd sit down and have breakfast. What are you happy about?" Or if it was a sad face, it's like, "Oh, what's going on?" So that's how I brought them up to be able to be open, to talk about feelings, and it was okay whether you were angry, and even if you're angry with me, that's okay as well. I remember my son said, "Oh, Mummy, Katori's upstairs. She's hitting the pillow." I said, "That's great, isn't it?" I said, "I think she's probably angry, but that's one way to get it out." And that's how I brought them up, to know that any kind of feeling that you feel is totally valid, and if there's anything you want to talk about, there isn't anything you're going to bring to me that I've either not done myself as I've got older. I've not had a client that's done it, or I've worked with or I've known somebody else who's actually gone through a similar experience. So that almost gave them carte blanche to kind of say, I know that I can come to my mum with anything.
Yeah, but you know that, I mean, because your children are in their 20s, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So raising your children like that, and I know we shouldn't do it, but as parents, we do feel like other people are looking at us at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
How did that, because that's quite a, different way of doing it, to the way in which you were brought up.
Yeah.
And it's all different to the way in which I was brought up.
Yeah.
And, maybe I'm just one of those people who always has this sense of what do other people think. And which is the wrong way of thinking, but it's actually a way I do think.
Yeah.
And I know someone was once telling me about they were somewhere, actually they were in the Caribbean, and they had their child, and she had this sense of all these people just looking at her as her child was misbehaving, and she wasn't doing it the way in which they would have expected it to have been done. And you can succumb to that sometimes very sort of like consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And I know I did on occasions succumb to that unconsciously. I used to say to myself, well, my parents would never let that happen. Because that's how I was raised. And I knew I didn't want to do it like that, but somewhere in my head that was clicking off all the time. But I see my daughter now raising her 3 in the way you describe, and I think, wow, I wish I liked that. It's this idea of a voice for a child.
Yes, because they and sometimes, for me, growing up, they've got wisdom because they haven't been indoctrinated by lots of things that they've either, now the social media, but back then. I listened, even the work that I do now, there's a lot of things. I work in a couple of schools and college, obviously, and university. But I listen to the young kids in the primary and secondary schools, and I think there are some of them that actually I'm still learning from them. So I think what we didn't have in our time back then was our parents listening to us. You just have picnic. Where you know? And sometimes a lot of these children. Talk about indigo children, we're all kind of born with the wisdom and things like that. So
but the thing, what you're saying then, you can shut down that voice.
Absolutely.
And in shutting down that voice there, that's not helping that child. So as a parent, you do that, and then when you want to get that point where you want your child to talk to you, if they've not learnt to talk to you, then they won't be able to talk to you. And many of us there as parents there's always, they're going to have a crisis at some point, and you want to actually make it better for them.
Or to support them. But you can't always make it better, but at least to kind of share that burden.
But you need them to be talking to you.
Yeah.
And, I hear from parents my age people my age who've got grown up children, they want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And they don't get that conversation.
Yeah. But usually it's like the time they realize is sort of like later in life than...
What's that, the children or the parents?
No, parents. Because many of us, we are learning, because this thing doesn't come with a manual. No. Even like you can't find a book that tells you how to raise children, let alone, how to navigate that whole thing of parenthood. I think many of us, we became parents because we were pressured by our own parents.
Well, there's an expectation, isn't there? Yes,
that's what I'm saying. There's an expectation.
And we know, a manual you might have is how you were raised yourself.
Yeah, but then,
yes.
But even the way we were raised was so broken that really the reality that we have children ourselves is either because of this innate sense of, I just want to raise kids who are not like me. You know what I'm saying? I think sometimes
but then you have the other bit there, don't you? Which is, if you raise children not to be like you, and then actually they're not like you, then you have a bit of a.
But then you're hoping that they're not going to be like you.
Yeah, you don't.
I mean, I want them to. I don't want them to be a carbon copy of me, but I do like it when there's they share similar values to me, similar views to me. They have an outlook on the world which is similar to me. I don't mind the sort of, dad sort of stuff. That's great. I expect that there. But I wouldn't want to be so far removed from me. And I can actually see how, as a parent, that can be so difficult as well. I mean, again, with this podcast very much about mental health there, but as parents, you have mental, just raising children I look at my daughter now, and then for all those 30, 40 something year old parents and mothers in particular there, trying to do a job, hold a job down and raise children as well there, and and also keep your partner happy as well, or at least something to function. That's a lot of pressure, that is, and sometimes your head must be really wanting to explode.
100%. But my question then is, okay, I do understand that you want them to have your value system, but how often do we sit down with our children and teach them what our value system is? Because this is the thing. Sometimes many of us, we expect kids to somehow understand what we are about without even explaining to them what it is. Because half of the time we're telling them, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You see what I'm saying?
How often do you get parents that say, that's really good what you've just done?
That's what I mean.
And having that balance.
Yeah. I think that bit there about the valuing what your child is doing at that time and seeing a value. So it's a sort of like half glass full bit, as opposed to the half, glass empty sort of bit there, which I'm wanting not to sound as if I'm sort of like looking back on a generation and being too critical, but that was the general climate. And I don't think it was just for, the Caribbean or the African communities. It was just the general climate back then. Whereas now we seem to have a more sort of like, we want to look for more positives. And I think we should do, because everyone's got that, haven't they?
They have, and we tend to pick up, and especially, I can speak for the black community or black families, it was always the things that you were always pointed out, or generally, I can't generalise, but about looking at negatives all the time and kind of you're going to get beaten for this, or you're not supposed to do that. And it's like, so what can I do?
That's the thing. What literally can you do? Because for me, one thing I would love to which I wanted to ask you was, as a therapist and as a parent, how much of that do you bring into the room when
one
you
or
deal
the other? It's not a case of there's no demarcation. I think it's just who I am, because I suppose if you're trained to be a train driver, you can leave work. If you're a train driver, you leave the train at the train station.
Yeah, the train station.
Whereas for me as a therapist, because it's not something that I put down. I have had people say to me, "And you can put down the therapy, right now." But it is who I am. I don't kind of tell me all about. We're going to let's meet for coffee. It's like, tell me all about what's going on for you. I don't. That's not how I live my life. But
you know why I'm asking that? Because it's like, one thing is like, because I spend so much time, basically either behind the camera or recording something. There's things that we do. And I remember observing, we were, like I said, I've known you for a while, and in just my observation, and I'm like, there's a thing I saw it actually even today when we were sitting down for a coffee, when Don was talking. It's like a move forward, and
you're moving your body,
and they're sitting back, and I'm thinking, she's listening.
I'm always listening.
That's what I'm saying. Is it something that has always been part of who you are, or is something that they teach you to do?
Ooh, okay.
Like, how do you listen? Like sometimes we listen just because we are listening, but how do you really listen?
Oh, that's interesting. Because what came up as you were saying that was, straight away what came up for me was it because I wasn't listened to as a child? That's the first thing that came up when you asked that question. Because I didn't feel that, one, that I had a voice, that I could exercise that voice, I could use my voice. That's just general speaking, not to kind of like, I felt scared to even, it was that bad. I remember when I was at college, we used to have these college dances every so often, and we'd get weeks, probably a couple of months' notice, and I would wait every day. I'd be like, I'm gonna ask if I can go to college dance. I'm at college, and I was still scared to even ask that question about whether I could go to the college dance. Right up until the day before, every single time I was like, no, it's going to be different. It's going to be different this time. It's like, I always felt that if I didn't ask right, I wouldn't get to go. If I didn't say it in the right tone. So that set me off in a way, even when I was leaving home, that in meetings I'd be sat, wouldn't say a word. So maybe it's because I got used to the listening growing up, because there were times when, my parents, my dad would come in, my parents would, you'd hear a little bit of rumbling and you kind of think, okay, something's happened, they're upset with each other, and it's like, I'd be listening out thinking, I've heard the door come, it's like, Dad's coming, it's like, is anything going to happen? Are they going to start fighting? And I'm noticing that my voice is getting quiet because maybe I don't want to kind of talk about it, but that's what it felt like. So the listening is probably something that I think was already there growing up. He's always like listening out and thinking, is everything okay? Because the house used to be quiet, but when everybody came home, it was quiet when it was just me and my mum was in there. But when my brothers would come home, like in the summer holidays, they'd go out in the daytime, come back in the evenings. And he was always like listening out for Dad, listening out for my dad if he came back as well, because he worked away quite a lot. And maybe for me, because the house, sometimes I was in the house all by myself, and I'd just be looking out the window thinking, I wonder what life is really like out there, looking at the sky, looking at the clouds. And so maybe I've just become attuned to kind of listening, because it was always either listening to see if Mum and Dad had a fallout, or listening to kind of see if my mum's called me, or I don't know. But it was interesting you've asked me that, because I'd never really thought about it
It's
before.
a powerful question, because
it is.
As you said before about giving your children a voice, and you can expand that into give people a voice, give your friends a voice. And I remember hearing once someone saying about, you've got a friend and they and you ask them how they are, stay with him.
Yeah.
So often you ask people how they are. You ask here we were talking about men. You ask a male friend how they are, but you're really not asking them how they are. And if they then start to tell you how they are you actually doing what you just said there, listening without you then interjecting with your own story, right, and taking it back to you, etc. And that's really very, very difficult. So I think and I think it's really important that we actually do pay attention to the listening.
But that's the thing.
It is.
I suppose as a therapist, we're having to listen to our client, because we want to be able to hear what they've got to say and support them with what they're actually sharing, because it's not about a case of saying, have you thought about doing that, you're not doing that right. It's like, it's not, when we speak to them, like I would probably say to them, how does that leave you feeling? So if I've not heard what they're saying, then it could be they're misconstrued, or I've got the wrong end of the wrong end of the story. So it is really important to be a good listener, and it takes energy, and it takes real kind of concentration to kind of listen.
You've also said something there, which is when you're listening, and I'm going to go back to that sort of like friendship, or to male sort of like relationships, which is, someone's told you something, but to even go back with, something which is trying to get them to actually express a feeling about it. It's and not just a feeling where you just say it's a sort of general agreement about it, as opposed to a bit of an exploration. Because we've talked about this before, about, say, for instance, relationship breakdown. And relationship breakdowns there, which for many men, I mean, when I walk through town and I see guys on the street, I always say to myself, well, that wouldn't take too much for me to be there. A situation where, when I have had a sort of like divorce, and my sister phoned me up about a year after broken up. And I said, what are you ringing me for? And she said, I'm just ringing to check you're okay. And I said, you thought I'd either spent my money on some car, some woman, or I'd been drinking. But the worry I had was that actually I could easily just I can see that scenario of you go in to drink, you don't do your job very well, you lose your job, you can't pay for your house, and it's that spiral there. And you're actually a part of that, managing that process of a really emotional sort of difficult period in your life there, is to say to other people, to good friends and to associates, I'm not feeling good, as opposed to, how are you now? Yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like,
that's what you do. Yeah. So
we kind of shut it down.
Shut it down. Yes.
But really, we do need to start talking.
Yeah, and for guys, there's a lot of evidence
especially
there.
For
It
black
says,
men.
that you know. I mean, I was at the barbershop last week, and we were talking about this, and how one guy who's a good age now, he lives on his own, and you know, he's looking back on his life. And looking back on relationships which failed, and this, that, and the other, etc., because he's lonely. And you know, and there's lots of guys who are lonely. Lots of black men of my age and older and younger, who are going to become, who are lonely. Basically, they don't have people around them, and you know, loneliness it's a slow.
Can be,
it can be very difficult.
Because I remember a couple of years ago when the British government brought out the Minister for Loneliness. When they brought out the Minister for Loneliness, and I remember doing a piece for radio around that concept of, are people really lonely? And the reality is, people are lonely, but we don't really. Because remember, society has changed now. Gone are the days where you could leave your doors open, and people actually, they talk about those times when you could leave your doors open and you could talk to your neighbor, you could talk to so-and-so and what have you. We were not closed up. We didn't have to, I could just turn up to your house and didn't have to make an appointment.
And no one does that now, do they? No one actually just turns up, for me, and says, "I'm just walking by."
We don't even know where you live, bro. We don't even know where you live. So you mean, let alone turn up.
Within family, you just turn up.
You don't just turn up. But back in the day, people did just turn up. I mean, I remember seeing my parents there. People, Mr. Reed used to just be walking by, and he said, "Mr. Reed," and you sit down. But now, no, it doesn't happen. So if you're a guy in particular, but anybody who's living on their own, you could easily go, if you're not working or whatever, a week and never see anybody.
Going back to your work, the work that you do, you work with, I mean, like with the work with the younger age group. What's the between your white clients and the black clients, what's the uptake for talking therapies? You know,
I work in 2 alternative supervision schools, so those are children who've been excluded from school and end up in a school that has smaller classrooms, smaller numbers of children in the classroom. So a regular school will probably have about 30 children in the class. In alternative supervision, you're probably talking about 8 maximum, because they've got it'd be ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and some of the children are actually going through trauma as well, not being able to cope in mainstream, so they're then taken out and put into alternative provision. The 2 schools that I do work in, I would say, is probably 98% white boys. There's 1 or 2 girls. The time that I've been working over the 8 years in both schools, there's only ever been a handful of black boys that have been in there. It might be a different story in the pupil referral unit. I don't know, and that's just in Sheffield. At the college, it was Longley College was quite a mixed college, and that's what I liked about it as well. In terms of, and I know my sense is that any student that was at the college at that time needed any support, whether they were black, Asian, or white, had access to. So I know they had a mix of clients then. At the university, there is, well, certainly at the University of Sheffield, there's a lot less black students that are at the university, and the odd times where some of the students do come and access the service. There's myself and another male colleague, Ron, who's also from Zimbabwe actually. We, as a service, we agreed the manager agreed with us as practitioners that if a client comes and asks for wants to see a black therapist, then we need to make that clear that we do have black therapists if they want to see them. So they've got that choice to do that. How many of them take it up? It's still predominantly, I would probably say about probably 95% white students. Why black students don't take it up, I don't know, because Ron and I, during lockdown when George Floyd died, I got a call from my manager asking if I could come and support some of the black students, because the African Caribbean Society had students feeding in wanting some support. So I came back and my manager said, how many could you see? And I said, well, I'd rather not just see them on a one-to-one. It would be better for them to see them as a group, because they can support each other. Because what I found in group work that I'd done before was, even when they didn't know each other, this was a trial that we ran at Longley College actually. There was 12 students that we didn't know each other, but by the end of the 6 weeks, they then became peer support for each other after the group had finished. So that was using that kind of model. That was what I wanted to use for the university. So we were doing some online group work with some of the black students, which was very well attended because they were all in lockdown. But as time's gone on, our lockdowns have been lifted. We're having less students, but we're still the group is still going. So that's what we kind of put on specifically for the black students. So generally, I just kind of think, I was born and brought up in Sheffield, so I do feel that the mix of kind of like black, I'm talking pupils and students, I still think it's predominantly kind of like white focus. Whether many of them outside of the institutions, whether they're going, parents who want to kind of get support for their own children outside of the kind of education system, I'm not sure. I hear statistics being, and I don't know actual numbers, but I do feel that not as many black youngsters get offered therapeutic support. I have to do my research around that. I don't know what the figures are now, and why it's not offered.
It's interesting. It's interesting what you say. I remember one occasion is one summer. We used to interview students who had particular additional needs, psychological needs in the summer, just to check about what they needed to actually enrol at the sixth form. And this particular Friday, we interviewed 3 or 4 girls, white girls, who'd been in psychological units. And, you'd read their sort of like profile, and that profile would include lots and lots of interventions, including intervention from CAMS and other services. And we accepted them because, we felt as if that intervention had been very supportive of those particular people. Then on the Monday, we interviewed 3 black lads, one Somali lad, a mixed race lad, and a black lad. And all 3 of them really had no schooling, secondary schooling.
Wow.
They had been permanently excluded in year 6 in primary school, then gone into secondary, and within a few months had been excluded. Yeah. And I don't know if it was all 3, but at least one of them on their record, they'd been refused CAM support because they were seen as too violent.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I was aghast at this idea that an 11-year-old, even if they are displaying violent tendencies, there's a reason for that. And that's what
Absolutely,
I thought the services were there for. So they hadn't got any of that support. So, on one hand, there's that supply side of things. It's not being provided. And then on the other side, that's sort of like, well, I can't see any value for it maybe. There's a reticence. There's something there because that's what you've got. We know that schools and colleges there can be very much that sort of like pipeline towards prison and mental health, all sorts of things, etc. there. And yet that support, early intervention, which you can begin to explore what it is which might be causing some of the disturbances, the difficulties they're experiencing, still doesn't happen. And I feel really sad about it. I feel sad about it that in my own role I always felt frustrated about it.
Yeah.
I always felt trapped a little bit by the pressures around me as well there. But and on occasions you would see things you thought, I just can't believe that, and it's still there. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a 18-year-old, 19-year-old who's done reasonably well at school, who then goes off to university, who's probably been seen by family and by school as a success. And you see yourself as this success. You see yourself as, I can see how they treat other black lads and other black children in this school. I'm not treated like that, and whatever.
Yeah.
That's a lot of burden, that is, to carry. And, you can imagine then you're in this university setting like Sheffield University, which is a very rarefied place.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. And, whenever I go there and I think, wow, I'm in awe, and I'm also like, this would scare me, as well. So what it must be doing to 18, 19, 20-year-olds who coming up from London, coming from Manchester, coming from Birmingham, coming from Bristol, and they're away from home, and they're having to manage, we talk about code switching. You're having to do so many different things, just to be.
And survive. It's about the survival.
Yeah.
I did. We in the group that we had at the university, there were 2 medical students. One was female, one was male, and I think they were. I don't know if it's 3 or 5 of them out of 200 who were white.
Yeah.
Either white and Asian. So, in most of the faculties, if there are black students, there'll be one of very few. And to navigate this space, I don't know what that is like.
Yeah.
What it would be like, because I know that back in the days in the 80s, Sheffield had quite a large black community here, but to come to a university, and I know Sheffield University is quite prestigious certainly for the medical side, what that must feel like to be in a cohort of that many with so few of you.
I say because it was me.
Okay.
So it was me, and I would say my 40-year career in education has largely been that, especially when I got to a senior position, that I would go to events where there were 200 people there, and I'd be the only black person there, and that's really, I could handle it, but you're having to prime yourself all the time.
Yeah, in preparation. It's almost like you're going into the firing line, preparing yourself for what's going to come.
And that's a lot of energy, that is. And when you talk to us on Friday, I was talking to a guy who was an architect, and he was saying exactly that. Young man just starting out his career. So and we want people to not be restricted by, expectations. If you want to be, and you can, go for it. But it might mean that actually, you are the trailblazer. Which means,
that's true.
And if you are the trailblazer, it takes a lot, doesn't it?
It does. It takes a lot of time and energy. Because even in our training, I just wanted to finish with this, but even in training to become a therapist, I was one of 2 black trainees, and the other girl left after the first year. She was only in her early 20s, so she left and did her job. But even now, I've been doing it for the last 20 years. Even now, there are other therapists that I speak to that they are, again, still in that similar position whereby they're one of a few in a large cohort of kind of white trainees. But then the trainers, I think there's a few more black trainers now, but back then there were very few. So we're still being conditioned or having to navigate this space of, and some of the trainees are even talking now about the racism they're experiencing, even in the training by the trainees themselves, their colleagues, alongside the trainers themselves. So it's going to take some change. But the one thing I will say is that there is a black African Asian therapist network now that had been set up by Eugene. Absolutely fantastic, because that's where we can come, we can vent, we can kind of talk and share and know that we're not on our own.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at that, and when I was at work, and what was great about it, just from a sort of like just seeing all these faces.
Yeah.
And I started earlier saying that, 10 years ago, when I met yourself and David, etc. That's when I first became aware there were black therapists. But when you read the journal and you see all these people, it is really quite I felt quite sort of like made up about it, in a sense of, you know, wow, this is fantastic. This is an area which I like it whenever I see new areas being developed, and you know, people saying we're going to claim this. This is our space as well. We're going to make this our space. We've got so much to offer and to contribute to the way this field develops itself.
Yeah, and. Sorry, you.
No. Go on.
I was going to say that when I first found out about them, I think it was an advert up in the training centre where I was doing my training. I went along to the conference, and I couldn't believe it. It's almost like I wanted to cry as soon as I walked through the door, because I saw this whole room full of faces that looked like me, and I was like, they're doing the same work as me. It got to the point where I thought, yeah, I've finished now, so yeah, I'm going to help out, you know. And I didn't want to leave, because I just felt fed. I felt like I'd been fed, I'd been nurtured, all of that. But
how does that then? That you see that you've got all these practitioners, but you were saying that, but even, you know, in the university and even in school and in the colleges, the number of black people, you know, who are receiving talking therapy is still relatively small, and that still seems to be a bit of a, well, maybe a conundrum. I don't know. I don't want to call it a problem. I'll call it a conundrum.
But I do think now therapy and counselling is, and talking about mental health is far more advanced than it was when I even started my training. It was still, you know, wasn't encouraged to kind of talk about your business. Where it's talking about mental health now, even within the black community, has changed. Whether it's going to continue to change, which I think it will do. The next generation, I think, are going to make sure of that. Which is good, and I do think the more we talk about it, there are more. I'm hearing now that there are more young people wanting to train to get into the mental health field, whether it be training to be a mental health nurse or become a therapist or working in schools and work, and so that encourages me. So when I hear anybody, and even my kids say. Even their friends have said, "Oh, so I was just thinking about becoming a." Oh, you can speak to my mom, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you," you know, because I want to encourage that. Because I do think, you know, because it's around mental health and it's to do with us as our people here on this island. I can say as an experience. I know when I go, if I was to go to Jamaica, I went to Gambia in April this year. I just think just that thought of thinking and being around those people that look like me. They may not even speak my language, but just being around them just makes me feel. I'm part of the collective as opposed to, okay, I'm here now.
And there's that sense of understanding of why, you know, what you bring to the table. So, you know, it may not initially be at the forefront, but it's there. Being a visual minoritized group or person, that is a part of what you're bringing to the table. I mean, some people, it may not come straight away. People have denials, they have all sorts of strategies, etc. But it's there nonetheless. And we were talking before. I mean, I've had therapy before, and I probably there was white women I went therapist, and I think my answer now to that is, I didn't really want to share all my stuff with anybody. Really. So actually, I was cheating a bit.
Were you being authentic in the sessions, though?
I thought I was being authentic about what I was talking about, but I wasn't talking about some other stuff.
So you held some of it back?
I held some of it back.
Of course.
And that could be a protection thing
it may well have been a protection. One of the things I've gained from both, I think Lungan would agree, he'd have different things he'd have gained from it, from these podcasts and talking with people like yourself, Angela, it's made me think a lot.
No, it's true.
It made me really think a lot, and made me think on this particular area, which is that sort of like, you know, that protection is still there. You know, it's an armory which you have there, which, you know, it's been so, you've built the walls up so high.
And so solid.
And so solid.
Like super solid. Super solid. And I think to your point on it's the, I think sometimes it's for us as guys, you know, once you engage in that initial difficult conversation topic area, you suddenly find that the others are literally, they just follow, and it's easier and easier, and then until you get to a point where you are able to candidly talk about stuff and be able to kind of deal with them in that way. And I always say that, since me and you started talking like on a regular, it's been a beautiful thing for me. Mm-hmm. And besides, being broken as I am, so
we're all broken.
Nothing is out of bounds. Degree, Nothing is ever out of bounds,
That's it.
Yeah, well, last week or 2 weeks ago, I went to get my hair cut at Fade's, and I got my hair trimmed. In fact, as soon as I walked in, they said, "You come for a trim or a tour?"
You mean like the hair scraped?
Yeah, it was a scrape. So hair scraped. So they said, "You here for a trim or a tour?" I said, "Come for both," and it was beautiful because when I had my hair, trimmed, I sat down and we were just talking, and this is where we got into a conversation about getting old and being on your own.
And I say getting mature. I don't like to use the word.
Yeah.
That's just
mature. All right, mature.
Like good wine.
But
like good wine.
But it's that idea, and I thought this is the thing. Such a beautiful conversation where, they're sharing with me all the insights they get from their customers who are talking to them, and and I'm hearing it from them, and I'm thinking, there's a point here. And there was point was, there's some things you need to grasp when you can. You don't want to lose certain things, because he was really talking about a person who'd missed out on relationships, etc. there, and was there in the flat on their own, and it was heartfelt. They'd heard it, they'd listened. And that was everything. They'd listened and they were sharing with me. I felt I went away sort of, and then they always say when you leave there, they said, walk good. Well, yes, they always say walk good. Yeah. And I felt like I could walk good.
Now, my question for you, Angela, is how are we going to normalize the conversation? Because I know, our community is still, kind of sort of like on the fence pertaining to, concerning that we have a mistrust for anything that has to do with our data, for lack of a better word. The reality, we don't really interface very well with mainstream organization, let alone somebody who is going to ask us questions about us. How do we navigate that space so that the next generation is able to access therapy on a regular? Because I'm a believer that we have to, the same way you had 40 hours a year, I think our children need to have therapy just as the norm.
I totally agree with you. I've said that to my children. I said, whenever you're ready, my daughter keeps putting hers off, but I've said to them, I think it's really important that everybody should have it as a regular thing. How can we encourage it, or how? I think it would just normalizing the conversation. It's like asking somebody, like we were talking earlier about, how are you? I think that is part of a thinking about the other, as in I'm here for you, I'm just checking in with you. For some people it just drops out of their mouth and just kind of think, just when you meet somebody, it's like, oh, how are you? But if we can be very thoughtful and very mindful and very present about when we are with somebody and checking in with them, because you don't know what they're going through. I think that's when things were going on for me. There were times when people came and said to me, how are you? But I would lie. But I know, but now I look back and I think to myself, but they were being very genuine, but I wasn't being genuine, but that's because of my own fears. But at the same time, we've got to look out for each other. We've got to be kind to each other. That's the one thing that I do kind of really encourage my children to do. No matter if anybody does anything wrong to you, just bless them, say thank you, because there'll be something that's come out of that. And then usually what's happened, they'll have fallen out with their friend, and then their friend will say, I was really sorry about what I did, I didn't realise what I was doing.
Because what you're talking about here is about vulnerability as well.
About being vulnerable, being authentic.
Yeah, and to for you to be vulnerable, you have got to trust the other person. And that part of that trust is through kindness, isn't it? And when people do kind things or generous as well there, then you feel as if you could share. If people are using, they're not. I mean, we talked there about banter, and not banter, but that sort of way in which people sometimes can, put other people
down. Yeah.
And when you
yes.
do that, then actually straight away, if you're then going to flip it around and somehow get into a conversation about something else, I'm still wary of you.
You're going to be
so give me distance.
Yeah, it's like if you're talking about other people, talking about me in that way.
Yeah.
And what I really hate is when someone says something, you've been very vitriolic. I'm just joking. I was like, no, that's gaslighting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And everybody's kind of follows it up by saying, I'm joking. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And to take that seriously. But it is about just being kind to each other. And by being kind to people, that would allow people to open up. Because there's some people, like you said, at home on living on their own, they're going to the shopping on their own, and just having a conversation. Even though I grew up quite shy, as I've got older and done my training, I'll talk to anybody in the street, apart from in London, actually, because that doesn't go down very well. It's
they don't like you, do they?
No, they don't. So that's the one thing. I just kind of keep that's why I couldn't live in London. I straight on the tube don't look at anybody. But up here in Sheffield, I'll talk to the parents or the grandkids in the park where I live, or at the bus stop, in the shop. I can make a conversation with anybody.
I remember the other day
I
was walking home, and about 3 doors up from me, there's an older person. She must be about late 80s. And it was a lovely warm evening, and she was sweeping the front of her area. It was about 8:30, and I sort of said something to her like this, hello, and I felt really good just for saying hello.
Yeah.
And it was because I see her around, and she lives on her own there, and I'm thinking to myself, she could easily, like I have sometimes, where you don't really talk to anyone all day.
Some people don't talk to anybody for the whole week. Not even a hello.
Yeah, so having in that little area where you are. So sometimes being kind and being generous can make you feel better as well.
That's right. That's very true.
Yeah, and I know when I've done, when I've been in and out all day on my own, etc., and I've gone and said hello to someone there. And I remember one occasion last year, I was picking blackberries. And this woman came up to me and said to me, you know what you have to do with those? In that Sheffield way they do.
So you'll rate your...
Yeah. I said, I don't know. I said, well, my mum always told me that when you pick blackberries, what you've got to do is you've got to wash them so you take out X, Y, and Z out of them and whatever. Oh, that's good, that is.
You mean we?
Yes, or whatever else it might be. But I knew,
from the insects and things like that.
Yeah, well, absolutely there. But we got into a conversation about whatever it was we were talking about.
What did you learn?
I learnt something,
Exactly.
and actually, it was a nice little conversation. We're going about my business of a day where it made the world feel slightly better than this because you want to feel the world's better, because that's about your mindset, isn't it, as well? Because you've got to, I think we were talking about before, you've got to actually feel good about yourself as well, as best as you can, and then when you can share that goodness.
That's true.
Everybody feels good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to jump in and just ask you, because one of the things we always ask as we near the end is, and we sort of call it, what is it?
What is your thing?
Yeah, what's your thing? What's your thing which you basically, keeps you on that sort of goodness trail, that feeling good, makes you feel good, lifts you up?
A few things came to mind, because I'm always going with the things that come up straight away was... music, dancing. I love to dance. You talk to my kids, you talk to anybody that knows me. It's like I can come on the dance floor in a nightclub, 10 o'clock. 4 o'clock it finishes. I'll be the last one on the dance floor.
Well, I hear last time you were out with the Cimarrons.
I was, yes, out with the Cimarrons, and I'd never heard of them before as well. So I feel kind of a bit. I should have probably known about that. But yeah, I do. I love dancing. I love music. And over the past few years, I've been in church, and my spiritual side of life is growing, and so I like to look after myself in terms of kind of what I listen to, what I watch, and what comes out of my mouth and how I'm thinking. I'm very aware. I make sure I'm very aware of what I'm. If it's negative, I'll kind of like try and counteract it. So I'm very much into living well, eating well, exercising. Like I said, dancing is my thing. And I enjoy being around people and talking and learning about people's lives, and that I suppose that comes from the years of doing therapy, and whether it's whether it's a 9-year-old child and I've just had some kind of wisdom moments with them, or because my oldest client was an 83-year-old. She only came for one session trying to deal with stuff when she was 12 years old, but she's like, no, I'm happy now, I've had a really nice time, thank you very much, and left. And I thought, wow. But at least, so just for anybody out there, it's never too late to start. So
no,
what I will say is, I know this is about kind of what's my thing, is for anybody who may be listening and contemplating whether to seek out a therapist. What I will say is, I would suggest to go and see as many as you need to see, and make sure that if you choose, whoever you choose is someone that you can relate to. Because when I work with clients, do an assessment with clients, I always say, look, I don't mind if I'm not the right person for you. I could remind you of some auntie or somebody you went to school with. Absolutely fine, because the most important thing for me is to make sure that you as a client is getting what you need. And if you're not getting what you need and you're paying for it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Make sure that you go, and you can go and check out as many therapists as you want. Some charge, some don't, but it's worth it if you know that you need to, if it's a lot of deep work that you're needing to do, make sure, and it's within your own right to kind of say, listen, it's not for me, but thank you very much. But make sure you ensure it's somebody that you know that you can work with, because if you want to go deep into the work, you've got to make sure that you feel safe and feel comfortable with the person that you're actually working with. So I flipped that around. I know that's a bit, but I just want to make sure that was in there.
So are we expecting a book in the long run, or?
Lungani, where are you going with this?
That's Lungani questioning.
To be honest, it's something that has crossed my mind about writing my life story. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but now that you posed it, I was like, my children have said that to me sometimes. They kind of said, Mum, because there is a lot that I've actually gone through when I look back on my life. But I can honestly say now that I'm in a space that I feel really good about life. I feel good. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and I know I'm aware of that. But I try and stay more upbeat.
Do you acknowledge, when you're feeling good, do you acknowledge that you're feeling good?
Oh, yes. Yeah. All the time. Yeah. I was like, I'm feeling good today.
Because it can feel a bit indulgent, can't it?
I don't care.
That's, you can tell my conservatism here, which is because when you are feeling good, I always liken it to that notion of the weather, where sometimes you've got that thundercloud over you and it passes, and sometimes you've got the blue sky. So when you've got the blue sky, you should bathe in it.
Absolutely.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
100%. Yeah. And even if the grey skies come over, I was like, yep, but the grey sky, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
So, and this is what I say to clients, is that whatever you've got, and I'm living proof, and that's, I wished I'd known what I know now a lot sooner, but it doesn't matter, because I'm now living a life where I know that I can choose to be upset if I want to be upset. I can choose to be happy if I want to be happy. All these different emotions you can choose, but you can also make a change if you're feeling that to go back to feel the opposite, which is quite positive or quite happy. It's easy for me to say that, but back then for me it wasn't so easy to do, to transfer to those different kind of feelings. And so I'm not trying to make it out to be something simple. It takes time and energy and effort, but I'm always working on myself. I don't think I'm ever going to really be cooked, for want of a better phrase, but I'm always looking to do the right thing, or to do the things that make me feel good. Meet up with friends, those passions that you had as a child, which we were talking about today. Go back to doing those things. There's always trying to find at least one thing in every day when you get up that makes you feel happy. And it could be just sitting in the back garden with, looking up with the sun on your face. It could be seeing, your grandchild, I don't know, taking the wrapper off. Anything that brings you joy, make sure you find some of that every single day. Yeah. And the more you do that, the more you're able to kind of stay on a level or a vibration, as we say, of having that balance in life, but also focusing more on the positive things that do come your way and really indulge in those positive things. So whatever works for you, make sure you do more of the things that make you feel good. That's one of the ways to try and support yourself in terms of your mental health. Stuff will go down in life, but just know that, like you said, in England, the weather always changes. The weather always changes. Just know, just one thing, that you can guarantee that it will always change, and I'm living proof that life can change.
But taking that weather metaphor, even the rain can be joyful.
Absolutely.
The rain can be one of the most joyful things in the world there. And, sometimes you can be in that and you've got your raincoat on or whatever it is there.
Or just in your clothes.
Just whatever it is.
It
is, and it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It is a beautiful.
Get out into nature as well.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been absolutely wonderful. And I think, we'll probably kind of have to get you back again.
Happy to do that.
No, for real, because I think it's been, for me, I think the takeaway from today will be the very fact that every one of us, even those we see and we think they have it all together, are going through stuff.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, and just because we don't tell people that we are going through stuff doesn't mean we are dealing with stuff. And it's a beautiful thing in the sense that we know humans are humans.
Yeah.
So till next time.
Yes.
Don, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Lungani, thank you very much.
Angela, thank you very much. Never miss an episode. Until next time, keep those conversations going and the clippers buzzing.